Okay, guys, I'm about through with this flood thing for a little while, but I wanted to show you um, something that they actually agree upon and what they didn't agree upon until up just recently, and then something I left out a long time ago, way back at Where Do Camels Come From? Before that, whenever I had talked about this and just kind of left it out. For a lot of times, they have these little blue places here and you can click on them and they talk about each one. You can get lost searching through these things sometimes. So let's just get into this. There's a few terms I don't really like and I don't understand, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm all in the know about this. I've looked at some people like Carlson and a few other people that have presented one thought and idea, and sounds like that's possible. And I've now looked at a lot of other people that were talking about it, most of them academics, and how it was a repeated series of a bunch of floods, but there was a couple of big ones and variations on a theme in between. And a lot of these people specialize in one exact place and one exact thing, strangely. And so you get kind of a variation on a theme of it too, or on a theme, if you will. So let's just go ahead and get into this and try to show you some of the information here. I'm not going to do it all. You can look up Missoula floods here and read it all in your own silence and glean a lot of the information out of it. Probably see something I scour over that I should have spoken about. For I've read this whole thing through a couple of times now and thought so many things in my head that I thought I should have started going a long time ago. So one of the things I don't like is they talk about that this is a flood series that's known where there were cataclysmic glacial lake outburst floods. And this is familiar, and they know about them and even have this word down here that starts with a J for ones that are like in Iceland and places like that. And it's where there's a puddle that melts up on the ice and it can't find fissures through for a while, but it finds one eventually and bores a hole through it, and then at some point, instead of slowly letting loose, it just lets loose. And I understand that concept, but whenever you get up to a gigantic concept, something that's holding all the waters of the Great Lakes and more in itself at one time, it becomes a different idea. But you know how the Great Lakes connect each other? What if there was, from the burst of the fragmentary comet meteoroid that we talk about, if it didn't flash burn a few spots in there and they semi-connected with each other, and some of them didn't quite. And so whenever it let loose at first, it did one thing, and then it let loose one lake that it made, which was giant, and that ate it all up. Now they talk about it reforming, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but instead of reforming, if it didn't burst through and let through separate lakes a few different times, for I don't understand how it could really do that, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but they tell you that they swept periodically across Washington and down through the Columbus River Gorge at the end of the last ice age. These events have been researched since the 1920s, and they were the result of periodic sudden ruptures of an ice dam, and that's the other term I don't really like out of all this, on the Clark Fork River that created glacial Lake Missoula. And I like that name. It's not all about what I like, but yeah, I just, after each ice dam rupture, like there were multiple of them, the waters of the lake would rush down Clark Fork and the Columbia River, flooding much of eastern Washington and the Willamette Valley. And we've got a thing coming up about Willamette. in western Oregon after the rupture, and it'd spill out into the ocean. After the rupture, the ice would reform somehow, they say, creating glacial Lake Missoula again, which would fill all up and then burp it over again. And so if there was this event that let it loose and carved out this area, it seems to me that it would have a hard time putting back a dam that would build up in any size that would hold back water that could be grown to a thickness while that was trying to happen. And so it would throw up again, if you will, and have this burping through effect. Because, pardon me, it seems to me more of what... So let's just look here real quick. So when we look at this, this is this giant lake that was up here. And it let loose and it just rushed through here, all up through here, down, around, through, rushing out, flooded it all out and found its way out into the ocean. But you look how wide of an area that did. I mean, this is huge. Huge, huge, huge. But whenever you have this ate up place that went away, I don't see a way for it to reform a wall, right? If you remember my recent video on global warming and the stuff that I talked about with Graham Carlson and his thing, but that's actually not his data he's using. He's using NASA and all these guys against themselves, where they show that, see, it was just like this, and he's like, well, look, there's the younger dryas, and if y'all remember, it was going along cold. Let's use this as a follow the bouncing ball, if you will. But this is the temperature we're at now, if you will. And this was the last ice age, right? And if you look at it, it's coming along, but it was going crazy. It was going crazy like this, and then all of a sudden, it starts taking an upward turn, and it looks like it's going to connect up here and go like that. And there's some zigzags, right? But what happens in the middle of this all of a sudden is it goes pow, and then it goes ching coom pow, and goes all the way back to an ice age, and then it goes pow pow boom, 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 and catches back up where it was going to go on that angle and gets back out of it. So it's like, well, the song was going along and fixing to speed up and rock and roll, and here we go fixing to do the twist, and there's this and then and then it goes back into speeding up, and then it goes. But did you hear that? It's kind of like that thing, where like, I heard that, everybody saw it, right? So these events seem to be a long time ago. Recently were just looked at as being spread far apart, and the more that they got the glacial ice cores and people did different places, it seems like it squished them up into two events. And if you look at that spike where it goes up and down, it just literally pegs that first one and down, and the one that goes back up. And both of these events here seem to be where it jogs up is almost overnight, instantaneously, and then it falls back down. Probably if we had an impact then, this would be rain falling out and all kinds of crap and fall back down. And this could fill up a bunch of holes that were there before, and it could maybe blocked off again, and then here we go again, washing and rinsing it away, and glaciers just smooth away anything that would have been on the ground, short of a real decent puncture, but it was 2 kilometers thick, right? So anyhow, it just keeps burping and letting this thing through, and I find it hard to understand they have that amount of water build up against a little dam that remade itself. And some people talk 20 times. Okay, some people talk 4 and 6 in certain areas, and other people talk about in all, kind of a 24, and other guys are talking 40. And so what is the reality of it all? Well, just as big as this area is right here, which is where the Indians come through and stuff, supposedly, but a lake that big, if it was held back and then only could come out this one area, would go blah, and then just run through and have only one way. Of course, this would spill out right into there. But this glacier was all of this. I mean, there's another one up here, but they're not concerning that. They're saying all of these floods that ran through here. I've always been real conspicuous about this round spot I'm in the middle of right now, too. This smooth area. But I don't want to turn into some geology show. And it seems like if I talk about this too much more, it's going to get in this rut. And I'm not much of a rut person. So let's try to get through this and some of the things they mention. They tell you at the last glacial maximum, so this is at the coolest point of the planet that was going on, right? And we were all froze over in the top of it here in North America, way, way deep. And all over Europe too, but all the way across till getting close to that Tarim Basin area, and then all of a sudden that Siberian tundra up there, that was wide open, and there were mammoths all over there when this was going on, which is another anomaly. But if you'll look, you can kind of see that effect, because even though the glaciers we're talking about, that whole landmass that was right there, kind of, see if I can get in on it. Boom, there we go. So above that constant ice that's all the way across. So you could go right across there. But look up here. Now this gap that's supposed to happen happens right through here. But there's land. There's no glaciers and things like that that's there. What maps like this don't show a lot too is that all through the Rockies right here, there was basically glaciers built on that almost too, of incredible amounts of ice. I mean, it didn't thaw during the winter, and you see these ski areas that are just treeless little runs that look like a golf course and stuff. Nay, you know, that was staying a lot of times winter, always winter, except for down in valleys and things like that. You know, everything was colder. Only takes a few degrees. That's why everybody's worried about going up. But you look at the way that thing used to go zigzag down here when it was in the last ice age, and we're worried about two degrees over here, and it's already gone above it. While we were on the planet, not having anything to do with anything, and it's just become some kind of farce that they base it all on CO2. Also, Antarctica was grown up quite a bit, and it pretty much reaches across here, and a lot of people said, well, it would have formed through and reached, but other people say no, it didn't, because that would have caused the ocean to slow down, and it might have all froze over if it did. And so that current rushing through there, which is always rough, never was allow it to happen. But it was slinging icebergs all the way up here, and it was icebergs here were breaking loose and coming all the way down to the Carolinas, installing themselves in there. And so there's a whole lot of ice and water. It's 2 miles thick there, right? And so they estimate that the cycle of flooding and reformation of the lake lasted an average of 55 years. Some guys said 50, and it toggles around. And due to their dating, supposedly, and all their little separate digs, and that the floods occurred several times over the 2,000 year period, basically between 15,000 and 13,000 years ago, are the start and the ending of the Younger Dryas. Really, if you got to pinch that just a hair more, but anyhow. U.S. Geological Survey hydrologist Jim O'Connor and Spanish Center of Environmental Studies scientist Gennard Benedo found evidence of at least 25 massive floods, and the largest discharging about 10 cubic kilometers per hour, or 2.7 million meters cubed a second. Well, what does that mean? About 13 times the Amazon River let loose through there. Well, that's nothing. 13 times the Amazon River is like 2/3 of all the rivers in the world, kind of, or something like that. But hold on, wait. Alternate estimates for the same peak flow rate of the largest flood include 17 cubic kilometers per hour, so 1.7 times that, and a range of up to 60 cubic kilometers per hour, which is 6 times that number. The maximum flow speed approached 36 meters per second, or 80 miles per hour. And there is so much of a difference between 10 and 60 when it's 6 times as much. And they've said things like, you know, so the first little floods they went through there, they already had a river pretty much in a valley, but the valley was kind of rounded off, filled up more than it was then, and then this flood came through there and ate that out into a much wider area, but not so much. And then a huge one came through with all of its crap slinging rocks, and basically just as like a sandblaster went through there and ate it through to a bunch smaller area and left sediment, and then another one come through and ate that through and left sediment. And so they're seeing this etching and depositing and all this going on. So it went through the middle and early Pleistocene Missoula flood deposits within the Othello channels, Columbia River Gorge, channeled scablands we talked about, which is down here through that. And see this Willamette River? We're going to talk about this Willamette and this place that ended up getting. Now, I'll just go ahead and give it up for you because I got a video. I probably should throw it out exactly at the same time as this. But apparently, it got taken down with these floods from the glaciers up all the way up there, from the glaciers, carried in a floating iceberg of hell through all the bullshit happening, and eventually gets deposited all the way down here. And it's a meteor, and it's huge, and it's been in our face. People know about it. So I'll probably put that out before this one because editing and meh. But anyhow, and so it's the Willamette meteor, and it's in a famous museum now, and people all the time, they used to let people crawl on it, kids and stuff, and take pictures. So kind of strange, but there it is. But this whole catastrophism, I guess what I was trying to get at a minute ago and didn't quite get there, is that the big fight against all of this took 40 years for them to even believe that there was a flood that caused anything, pretty much. And then they started agreeing with, oh, this, that, and the other, and then they turned it into all these separate little bitty floods that weren't so bad, and they decided to agree upon it. But no matter what you look at it, the huge flood that they talk about there is more than all of the rivers in the world at one time coming through this one river valley. Kind of like the deal on creating the Grand Canyon and doing such in a quick amount and fashion. And so it happened all the way through the Scablands, Pasco and Quincy Basin, and Walla Walla Valley near Walla Walla, Washington. And so this is the type of thing that it left, are these scablands, and that's literally like water with all this crap in it finally finds a way out in this valley that's here, of its super rush form churning up and eating things more, and it starts depositing down some silt. But as it does, wherever the little ripples become, things stick to that more, and this is calming down and spreading out of it, and it leaves this ripple just like ocean water. And I've even seen a display where they've got this machine where they cause this fake tsunami deal, and it recedes, it leaves these situations. Only this isn't a tsunami, it's going one way and then slowing down, but it gets similar effects. What you can't see in this picture right here is, even though you're looking at about 1.5 to 2 kilometers across, this whole valley thing is really about 4.5 across, going all the way down through there, and the ripples are going not just in this deep spot, but up over the edge of this. They say in the water here, somebody said 400 meters deep of water going through there at the rate we were talking about before, but of course it was going under 80 when it gets here, it slowed down and spread out and just and went from 480 meters all the way down, and then it finds little fissures, and not this place apparently, but it finds little fissures through, and it eats a final river back through whatever's going on, and of course at the lowest points, and then that starts etching through, and now we see this river with this little rivers in there, but these valleys that come up from it, and then it just goes up steep, and it's wide as hell. And what does that cause from? There's a giant flood that's here, and it looks much like the erosion that's happened at Niagara and stuff, but just on a gigantic scale. And they talk about how Niagara's walked itself 10 miles in this short amount of time, eating itself away, and we're just looking at it right now. And okay, well, the flooding also quit too, going over, and that slowed all down. But then they make a dams, and all these things happen. But at the same time, all that happened to this place, not even over a 1,000-year period or all this. Most of it happened in this huge floods, and they even agree on it right now at this point. So they talk about this hypothesis that they have going on here, and places like this Potholes Cataract that they even talked about with Carlson and stuff, and they compare how huge this was eaten away, and just Niagara is this one little bitty piece, and how much it took water coming there to fill it up, that they say was rushing through here at 60 miles an hour or whatever, and eating it away. And there was enough water where it wasn't just like, and then went down, but it continually ate it away to what you see, and then slowed down. Or there were repeated ones, up to 40 times it did enough to even fill this up almost all the way and to here. But they see that it's almost the same size flood, because this was eaten to be a bigger size. So if the same water came through, it would only get up to there, and then up to here, and then down to the bottoms. But they try to say all these different flood situations. But Brett's view about talking about how it had cut through basalt deposits in 1923, so back in the day. And believe me, during this time, science was trying to get off of a biblical model. It was a thing that had been going on for a while, to where everybody was trying to date and put things around a biblical model and stuff, and it had gotten a point to itself. And Brett's view of this was seen as arguing for a catastrophic explanation of the geology, ran against the prevailing view of uniformitarianism. And that's the thing where they just have this slow deposit erosion, and everything is on easy listening music and slow jazz 104 FM, and there's never any rock and roll songs, and nobody ever heard of heavy metal before, right? But he came out and he goes, man, no, trends in music apparently have changed in different times, and there used to be some rock and roll going on here. And so the Geological Society of Washington got together, and he presented different papers in 1927, meeting with other geologists, and J.T. Pardee worked with Brett's and had evidence for an ancient glacial lake concept that lent credence to Brett's theories, right? So they got that all together, and they kicked off this acrimonious 40-year debate over the origins of scablands and so on. And so whenever you see these people now and they're going, yeah, scablands, there was a flood in there, they didn't want one. And apparently they're pretty sour about the fact that it was proven that there was, and it changed crap. And you don't see it in your books very much. And they don't talk about the possibilities of what might have caused it, other than this Missoula flood idea, which I guess is the prevailing thought. And they don't want to confuse kids by giving them too many different options, but why the hell not? Why not say, well, we think it's this, but people say it could be that, could be this. What do you think? Answer under number 8. something small. Don't be rewriting a whole paragraph. If you need extra space, write on the back. But don't go crazy, guys. Just a simple thought. I'll probably understand where you're going with it. Moving on to number 9. So they have this idea and this scablands in different areas, but you can imagine too, whenever they had that concept come out, that people didn't like that. And so whenever they go, well, we just went a couple hundred miles over here to the east, and it looks like all this stuff happened over here too, and they don't want it to end up at being at the same time, and they can't be synchronous with each other in any way. And oh no, here we go again, right? And we're just past this, not too many years ago. Apparently this was settled before I was a kid, but whatever. But this 40-year debate went on, and their research over the next 30 years collecting and analyzing evidence that led them to identify Lake Missoula as the source of these floods. After Pardee studied the canyon of Flathead River, he estimated the flood waters there, in excess of 45 miles per hour, would be required to roll the largest of the boulders moved by the flood that were deposited just down from it. Right? But worse than that, he estimated the water flow was 9 cubic miles per hour, and more than the combined flow of every river in the world. Estimates place flow rate at 10 times the flow of all current rivers combined. Now, I swear whenever Randall Carlson said this, that other guy made fun of it. Like, you wanna, and everything, and it's like, and I think he mentioned Brett's and some other people and other guys that aren't even mentioned here that apparently have gone through this again. And not that I'm all touting on his view and I don't have a dog in this fight yet, but I got a puppy I'm raising. And it looks like there was a whole lot of different floods that happened in it, and I agree with that concept, but also giant floods that this guy even agrees with, that puts pretty much the numbers he was spitting out, Carlson was, and everything, and every flow, estimates place the flow rate at 10 times the flow rate of all current rivers combined, come rushing down through this whole area. Whoa. And it deposited a meteorite right there that I think landed all the way up here, and whenever it bloomed and let loose, it went with it. And maybe it was a splash effect, and it exploded and a piece landed in it, and that chunk let loose. I have trouble with this dam regrowing. Where are we at now? 20 minutes? Man, 28. I don't want to go too much longer, guys, and go on. But, they're saying it's 4,500 megatons of TNT worth of damage. And so, and other guys go, no, it's much more than that. How many nuclear bombs would you have to set off in this valley the way that it was to end up getting it to the way that it is now? And it's kind of stupid because you're comparing like damage that way, or amount of TNT you would have to use to make it look like that. And people say that's so low it's not even funny. There's this place called Dry Falls, and it's like, God, it's huge, but water was full in here and going at over 65 miles per hour and full up to this line and eating all this away, leaving just this scab stuff. But at one time there was a river that ran through here, and it turned it into a big valley. Look at the river runs through here, but now it's just like raw and just ate through there. And behind you, it's crap. And then there's that little flooding out looking spots and so on. But that's also cool. Look at all these mesa land looking areas that are like old westerns. So they talk about a multiple flood hypothesis. This one guy back in 1980 said it was probably 40 or more. It was placed on deposits at 9 Mile Creek and this one Burlington Game Canyon. And maybe those weren't involved in the other ones, or maybe they had separate ones that are coming off mountains or coming off something else, or is it really? They also talk about a touchette bed in tephra and ashes from repeated deposits from Mount St. Helens itself, and how that gets laid out in these layers, and that's kind of showing you also the record of it having happened. And I don't know enough about that to try to refute it in any way. And so was there 40 of these events that run through there, and some gigantic ones? I mean, with all the raining out and things, yeah, it could be. And it could keep making little lakes up in the glacier and then eating it away. And there was a lake behind it, and it ate it away and ate it away. And every once in a while, it'd eat a 2 or 3 connecting together and just go through there. I mean, sounds like something. Here's something neat. Ice Age Floods Institute put a rock up here to mark it. Glacial Lake, Missoula, high water mark, 4,200 feet. From what I understood from somebody else saying something about this, and Carlson, and that guy trying to refute it, that it's 4,200 feet, but now we see a depth of blah, blah, blah. But when it ran through here and did the big one, it wouldn't have been the biggest gap for whenever it ran through after 2 times of it doing it, and all these little ones, it left it to that depth of a depth, but it wouldn't have been quite as bad. And so the number of water coming through could be exaggerated. And by saying exaggerated, it's only 6 times more than every river in the world added together all at one time. And that's what they're backing off to. And yet Randall continues to say, that hey, there's been a whole bunch. Well, anyhow, I get to this, I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at Camas Prairie and everything, and they keep talking about these sediments like I showed you earlier, and right here, and they keep mentioning, well, the only place that's like this anywhere in the world, how much time do I have? 32, oh gosh. So, the only place that's like this in the world is its sister. Yes, like Luke, there's a sister, and she knew the force too. So let's go look at that. For those Altai Mountains, right? They were talking about in the Altai Republic here and stuff. At the last ice age, this was all covered up with ice. But wait, no, that's just the place. I was going to say, because the ice ends over there at the side where exactly the red spot is and across. But here we talk about the same thing. These glacial lake outburst floods. Man, it's just like magic. They've got them too. And so apparently these things may have hit in a few different places. Maybe there's stuff over there too, and I don't know how much they've checked for the microspherules and the microdiamond type things and platinum levels and things like that, or that type of deal. But just one example here of it and a couple of pictures. So you see this river runs through here now, and that's where the last of it did, but it's actually eating through gravel here that's glacial till that was all left down over here. It's hundreds of feet thick at this point right here at these mountains and stuff where the water ran through and just ate this away. And I think we're looking the wrong way here. It needs to be looking that way to get the effect of it. But let's look at another view, and here's those same ripples that come through their area, and they are huge. There's this one picture I saw where these people are standing up on one, and it's bigger than standing on the roof of a 2-story house. I mean, they're just gigantic. See that little line right there? That's a 2-car rut road. Runs right through there. Runs over that little hump. So these things are quite tall in amplitude. They're different, but then you figure out, look at this whole valley that used to be flooded in some way. So we're not going to be able to go into depth on this one, and probably that's better for all of us, but they tell you that the catastrophic outburst that happened out of this thing ended up being a little bit bigger than the biggest one that came on the other side that we just talked about being 6 times all the rivers in the world. For over here, it was like 6.5 times all the rivers in the world. And in theirs, they mentioned that this sandbar is being eaten away by the river that comes through it, like kind of the American Indian thing that they found the stuff at, which I talked about in the Canyon Creek. But that over these mountains that you're seeing was the water. And funny how that erosion pattern that's right there looks a lot like behind the Sphinx of water running down. That's the concept they're talking about. Water makes that. Wind and stuff doesn't make that. Even on a grand scale, you can see it small, big, so on. But this looks like a beautiful place to have a picnic and see deer and everything, and no big deal, right? Well, some glacier chunk was left here in the solo that was in this area here, a dip, and it left this little pond that's there, but also it carved that whole valley that's down there. But in the leaving of it, this right here is a gravel bar that's basically, this is sitting in a gravel set. And that gravel bar is supposedly some 60 foot tall. Oh, there are little people here, you can see them. It's like 60 foot tall, and it's up to this level, and then kind of an escarpment at that level. It fades back down over the next 1.5 kilometers of nothing but glacial till gravel crap that got deposited there whenever things went around that corner and left it, but still was pushing over it enough to clean off the top of it, if you will. Isn't that amazing? And here's striations of these sedimentary effects that were all left by it. There's this other real cool picture that shows chaos, and then all of a sudden, meh. And it's like that you can see where it happened in it, and it's not, I don't think, in this run here. This whole valley was full from this at one time, rushing down through here with water, and anything that would have ever been here is gone, wiped clean. And here, sedimentary layers that have been left down too of it. And here's your word for the day. We're going to call it varves. And varves are little sedimentary layers that are left like this, which are a natural thing over time that leave like a rings on a tree, a periodic record of sedimentation. Not necessarily for the flood. This is more like natural forming and then cut into it. So they talked about huge blocks, and that big black block that we were looking at right there was actually a big black block that got moved down the river from way back up and everything. They have ice rafted blocks which get into an ice raft like that meteor I'm going to show you the video about. Early deposits are seen among the Khatun River of eddy deposits all left through, and these rippling effects and stuff that are there. The timing of it though puts it around 12,000 BC to 9,000 BC, and that throws it right in the exact same situation, and kind of leaves out the first event that happened on North America, but encompasses everything else and falls out the end of it. So it's huge. And here's a little click back from Missoula floods. And so they connect with each other in a concept of happening at the same time in the same type of place. But they talk about this maximum lake volume that they had, and the ice dam was about 650 meters high, and that held enough water discharge that was bigger than Lake Missoula. And here again, they've given this idea of it maybe happened a couple of times here too, but and not no 40, and yet there was this giant one that went through that made up most of it. And that's only the one in this little area of this Altai. See if we can show where Neptune River. Now I'm not going to show it on a map, but that's just the Altai region that's there too, and there's more to look at. And if I could show you a map right now, a little bit to the right of this, there seemed to have been a Neverwinter Valley, and up and to the right of there, and even farther up, and where now we think of as being Siberia, and oh, they wanted to send you to the Western Front, and all that woo was actually thought over at the time and had mammoths all over it. So quite interesting. We're going to cut this at 40 here, guys. But did you know there was another one on the other side? For I mentioned it, but I never really showed it. And I kind of wanted to do it after I show you what they're willing to agree with and the amount of water volume that ran through these things. But they don't want to correlate it to another catastrophe, and you start getting people worried about meteors, and they go, well, here's all the data that says there's been a meteor, and they go, oh, you just want that to happen. And it's like, no, I don't want it to happen. I want the truth to be known on what really happened. Oh, now we're stupid and we don't know what happened. Well, you were disproving the guy before you, but that guy disproved somebody else, and it went down the run of that. And it's not that I'm attacking you, I'm attacking other evidence. How about I leave your name out of it and still say the same thing, or is that still not good enough for you? Because it's looking this way, and we're going to sit here again and go through 40 years of, yeah, okay, there was something that happened real bad. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, all the people that were involved with it are dying off, and now we agree with this new thing, and the new wave of people just have to accept it and go on with it. We got to do that. We can't do it in our lifetimes. And that's where the problem lies, on this slow creep and crawl to figure out things while they're slowly eroding away. And people are running around and looting crap and everything else, and you never know what you never knew you never knew. And what's up under that little hill right there and that little bump? It'd be amazing to find out if maybe there was Stonehenge type circles built under those little Indian mounds that we're not allowed to look at, that they haven't adequately dated in any way, shape, or form, because they've left it alone. I mean, I understand the PC culture of the idea, but some of these things in just initial dating date back to the point that, like, you can't really claim this, that you were always in this valley. I mean, we can try to prove that if you're willing, but I'm not saying to tear up Indian mounds, people. I'm saying that we should do some types of investigation for a lot of things, and something like this that leaves effects that look like this do a whole lot of damage. And again, I don't want to be the fear-mongering punk, but at the same time, shit happens. And we're saying 10,000 years ago, so no big deal. Well, hey man, it might happen again. You know, are we due or are we not due? Is it every once in a while? Looks like things have happened a bunch of times. Maybe we ought to just at least devote like double what we're doing to the idea of stopping these meteorites. Got another video I'm going to do about meteorites and how we found the first recorded instance of somebody actually getting killed by a meteorite. No, it's not Sodom and Gomorrah and things like that, but something happening like that. And it's got a couple other stories of meteorites and causing local damage and stuff in it, but it'll be a little small one. Anyhow, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And we'll get on to it, and I'm going to try to get off of this flood. But whenever I say that none of this stuff equals, of course, a biblical flood and over the mountains and everything, but you look at something like this, and that does have that effect to it. But things were localized in certain areas, but remembered over long term, this would have been the ancient memory. And then when it happened again in Sumer, that would have been where God said that it wasn't going to happen again, but it did. And so Abraham left and worshipped other gods and so on. It says it directly in there, but that's not for this video, really. And so we're moving on. Like